ever feel like your faith is being, I don't know, like stretched thin,
Oh, yeah.
like facing a king who's totally lost his way and a drought that just never ends, and like everyone around you is worshiping the wrong God?
Yeah.
That's kind of the world Elijah walked into, and based on the sources you sent over, sounds like that's kind of hitting home for you right now.
Yeah, it does.
So we're going deep diving into the story of Elijah, this prophet who faced all that and more, and whose story might have, well, some surprisingly helpful lessons for us today.
You know, what's really fascinating to me about Elijah's story is that it doesn't try to sugarcoat the tough parts of faith.
Right.
We often think about miracles as these big, like, flashy events.
Yeah.
But with Elijah, we see something a lot more, I guess, nuanced about how God works.
Okay, so let's break this down. We're starting in 1 Kings chapter 17, 18, and 19. Elijah's story starts with him out in the wilderness, which is about as far from like a relaxing vacation as you can get. But here's where it gets interesting. He's surviving on food that's being delivered by ravens.
Ravens.
Ravens. Not exactly your typical, DoorDash.
Right. And that's actually why this detail is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Ravens were often seen as, well, kind of unclean animals in that culture.
Oh, interesting.
Some scholars even think that this was chosen to symbolize God working through things that society kind of rejects or overlooks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful reminder that God can provide for us in the most unexpected ways.
It really makes you think, where in our lives are we overlooking maybe support or help because it doesn't look how we expect it to?
Yeah.
It's like that saying, sometimes the miracle is in the mess. And speaking of unexpected help, Elijah's story keeps going with this widow and her son.
Mm-hmm.
They're down to their last little bit of flour and oil.
Yeah.
They're about to starve. And then Elijah just shows up and asks her to make him a cake first.
Now that seems a little strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But this isn't really about food. This is about trust. The miracle isn't just that the jar of flour and the jug of oil never run out. It's that the widow chooses to trust Elijah. And in doing that, she's trusting God, even when it seems completely illogical.
Yeah. So it's that leap of faith, even when you're down to your last, crumb. It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest abundance comes from giving what you have and trusting that things will work out.
Exactly. And this whole idea of trusting God, even when things seem impossible, is really important in Elijah's story. Things get really intense when he confronts King Ahab, who has, well, let's just say he hasn't exactly been leading the Israelites in the right direction.
So it's not just a drought they're dealing with, it's like a spiritual crisis.
Yeah, exactly. To really understand how tense this confrontation is, we have to remember that idolatry wasn't just, some theological debate back then.
Right.
It had massive consequences for the people and their relationship with God.
So Elijah's not just saying Ahab has bad theology, he's challenging their whole society.
Exactly. And he doesn't hold back. He challenges the prophets of Baal to a showdown on Mount Carmel. Picture this. It's Elijah versus 450 prophets of Baal. May the best God win.
It's like the ultimate reality show.
Right.
So we're talking fire from heaven, right?
Well, not just yet.
Okay.
The prophets of Baal, they spend the whole day calling out to their God, dancing around their altar. They're even cutting themselves.
Oh, wow.
And nothing. Silent.
Awkward.
Right. And then Elijah steps in and suggests, maybe with a little sarcasm, that Baal is on vacation.
Oh, my God.
Or maybe he's asleep.
He didn't.
Elijah then prepares his own altar and douses it in water. Not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Wow.
And then he prays to God.
Okay, I can feel the anticipation building. So what happens? Does God come through?
Oh, yeah, he does. Suddenly, fire falls from the sky.
Whoa.
It consumes the entire sacrifice, even the water.
Yeah.
It's just this incredible image of God's power.
Yeah.
A clear answer to the challenge.
Talk about a mic drop moment.
And all the people who are watching this, they fall to their knees and shout, "The Lord, He is God."
And then Elijah, he seizes the moment. He confronts the prophets of Baal and cleanses the land of idolatry. It's a victory for the one true God.
You'd think after all that Elijah would be, on top of the world.
Yeah.
Confident, fearless.
You'd think so, right? But that's where things take a really, really interesting turn.
So we've got this epic showdown on Mount Carmel. I mean, fire from heaven, the crowd is loving it. And the prophets of Baal, well, not so much. You'd think Elijah would be feeling, unstoppable.
Yeah, you would. But what happens next is a really good reminder that even the strongest people of faith are still human.
Right.
They have the same fears and doubts as everyone else.
Wait, hold on. He runs away. after all that.
He does. Queen Jezebel, who is Ahab's wife, she's furious, and she threatens Elijah's life.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, he's not so fearless anymore. He runs off into the wilderness. He's exhausted, he's disillusioned, and he's starting to question everything. I get that. It's like 1 minute you're on top of the world, and the next you're hiding out, wondering what it all means. Kind of like burnout, right?
That's a good comparison, actually. One of the sources you sent mentioned that connection between Elijah's experience and what we call burnout today.
Interesting.
That feeling of being totally drained, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It can hit you even after you've done something amazing.
So even prophets get burnt out. It makes them seem more relatable,
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that even when we're feeling vulnerable, God doesn't abandon us. An angel appears to Elijah, gives him some food, and tells him to rest. And then he's led to Mount Horeb.
Mount Horeb.
The same mountain where Moses met God.
Wow. Okay. So this is a place full of history where God has shown up in some powerful ways. Is there going to be another big showdown, more fire?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
This time, God reveals himself in a completely different way.
Oh.
Elijah experiences this powerful wind, an earthquake, and a fire. All these symbols of God's power. But God's voice doesn't come through those things. Instead, God speaks to Elijah in a gentle whisper.
A whisper. That's kind of unexpected. It's like after all that drama, God chooses the most, personal way to communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful moment.
Yeah.
It shows us something important. God's power isn't just in those big, amazing moments. A lot of times, it's in the quiet times when we're still and we're reflecting that we can hear God most clearly.
So it's like those times when you just have this feeling, the sense of knowing that you can't explain, but it just feels right.
Yeah, exactly. It's about paying attention to those inner feelings.
Yeah.
Being sensitive to those subtle ways that God is trying to communicate with us.
It makes you think, how often do we miss those whispers because we're, too busy looking for something bigger, something flashier?
That's a great point, and it's definitely something to think about, because even in that quiet whisper, God gives Elijah new instructions, a new purpose. He's told to anoint Elisha as his successor, so the work that he's been doing can continue.
Ah, so it's bigger than just Elijah's story. It's about passing the torch.
Right.
Mentoring the next generation and making sure that the work of faith continues.
Exactly. It's a really powerful reminder that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
We all have a role to play in carrying that light of faith forward.
It makes you think about the people who have, invested in you, helped you along the way.
Yeah.
And then, who are we called to mentor, to guide, to help? It's like this really cool cycle of giving and receiving.
Absolutely. That's what's so beautiful about faith.
Yeah.
It's a journey we're meant to take together, to learn from each other, to support each other through the tough times.
Speaking of tough times, Elijah's story definitely has its share. But one thing that really stands out is even when he's afraid, even when he doubts, he never completely loses sight of God. He might question, he might struggle, but he keeps coming back to that belief, that trust in something bigger than himself.
That's such an important observation. Faith isn't about having all the answers or never having doubts. It's about that trust, that willingness to keep searching, to keep listening, even when we don't understand.
So Elijah's story, it's pretty wild, right? But it's not really about, fire raining from the sky or ravens bringing you lunch.
Right.
It's about something way deeper. It's about seeing how God works in our own lives, in our own unique ways, and looking at what you sent us. That seems to be, kind of what you're wrestling with right now.
Yeah, definitely. All those sources you share, the articles, the personal stories, they all point to that same idea, right? Recognizing all the different ways that God shows up in our lives. Sometimes it's big and obvious, like that fire on Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's subtle, like a whisper when everything's quiet.
It makes me think about those times when I felt like a little push to do something, or I suddenly understand something I didn't before. Maybe those are like whisper moments.
Yeah, maybe.
The ones we miss if we're not paying attention.
Totally. It's about learning to be aware of those whispers, those nudges, those unexpected good things.
Yeah.
That might just be God working in our lives.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something kind of personal.
Yeah.
What have been some of your, raven moments? Those times when you got help from a totally unexpected place?
That's a good question. I've definitely had times where I was struggling with something and the answer came from, the most random person.
Yeah.
Or in a way I never would thought of. Looking back, those moments almost feel, planned. like a little nudge in the right direction.
It's like you think you're all alone and then someone shows up, a friend, family, even someone you don't know, with exactly what you needed to hear.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, was that just chance or was it something more?
Definitely something to think about. And I think Elisha's story tells us to be open to those possibilities, to think maybe, just maybe, there's something bigger than us at work in our lives, guiding us, helping us, even when we don't see it.
So as we finish up this deep dive into Elijah's story, I want to leave you with this. Where have you heard that quiet whisper lately? What's felt like your raven moment? Where have you seen God, even when things were tough?
And remember how important it is to mentor others,
Yeah.
to pass the torch, like Elijah did with Elisha. Who in your life needs your encouragement, needs you to guide them, support them? Who can you help on their journey?
Because at the end of the day, Elijah's story isn't just about one guy's life. It's a story that keeps going in all of us as we figure out faith and doubt and the mysterious ways God works in the world.
That's right. So keep searching, keep asking questions, keep listening for those whispers, and keep sharing your own journey of faith with other people. You never know who might need to hear it, who might be inspired by it, who might find hope in it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hope you found it, helpful and maybe even a little thought-provoking. Remember, the journey of faith, it's a constant exploration. And sometimes the most amazing things we learn come when we step outside our comfort zone and embrace the unknown. Until next time, keep searching, keep growing.